Hello guys, welcome back to another tutorial on complete .NET Web APIs. So today what I'll be covering is validation. So whenever we make requests to the controller by sending some request object, then using mediator, it is the command is then sent to the command handler, and that's how the request gets processed. So in this step, what we'll do is we'll try to validate the input requests, and if there's some invalid data, we'll give the appropriate messages. And to do this, what we'll be using is a library called Fluent Validation, along with another feature of MediaTor called pipeline behaviors. Now, pipeline behaviors are basically mediator classes which can be injected or inserted between the mediator pipeline to perform specific actions either before or after the actual request has can be handled. Okay, so I'll show you what I mean. So if you see, we have the employee controller here, and say this is a add employee action method. Then using mediator, what we are doing is we are sending this add employee command, and it is being intercepted by the command handler. Now, before this command request is intercepted by the command handler, we can inject pipeline behaviors where we can do some logic either before or after the request is being handled. And pipeline behaviors can be used for various functionalities like logging, validation, authorization, caching, etc. Today, we'll look at the part wherein we'll use the pipeline behaviors for validation along with Fluent Validation library. Okay, so to begin with, what I'll do is I will create a folder called as pipeline behaviors inside application common. So if I come here, I will create a new folder and name it as pipeline behaviors. And I'll create a new class called validation pipeline behavior. Okay, let's remove the unnecessary usings. I'll change this to public field class validation pipeline behavior. Okay. And so like command handlers, if you see, it will take in a request and a response. And validation pipeline behaviors need to inherit from IPipelineBehavior, which belongs to mediator. So we'll create just one behavior which is generic for all kind of commands. So for that, we will say that this is T request and T response. Okay, similarly, we'll put it here. And then let's add some generic constraint where T request is. So if you see now, T request will be any mediator command which inherits from I request. So if you see a command, employee command inherits from I request. So we'll say it is I request of a response, that is T response. Okay. And where T response is, so whenever we are returning the response from the handlers, it's a particular response type. And when we are using error or library, as we've seen in the previous tutorials, so what we'll do is we'll use an interface called IRR. So if I just right click here and go to definition, if you see, error or is inheriting from IRR interface. So we can use that. So let's say this is IRR. Okay. So now since we have set up the generic constraints, let's implement the handle method. And let's say this is public async ask handle. Okay. And here in the pipeline, what we do is we just skip to the next. That is, the next thing to be executed in the pipeline will be the command handler. So this piece of code will be executed before that. So what we can do is we can just chain it to the next one. And the way it is done is we just say return, or what we can do is we can say var result equal to await next. Okay. And so any code which is executed here, code before the handler is executed. And similarly, after that, we can do code after the handler is executed. Okay, so the validation logic will come in here. So let's see how the pipeline behaviors work. And then we'll just return the result. Okay, let's see how the pipeline behaviors work now. Yeah, before that, we'll have to do some wiring. So we'll have to, for dependency injection, we'll have to register it to the dependency injection file. So let's go to the configuration dependency injection folder. Now here, what we can do is we can register it. So let me just say services dot add scope, and we'll take in type of, so the type and the implementation type. So type of, so since we are using generic, so it will be IPipelineBehavior. I'll just put a comma here since it's generic. This is the service type, and the next one will be the implementation type. Implementation type will be the behavior which we have created. So it will be type of validation behavior pipeline. And we'll put a comma here. Yeah, so now once we have registered this, let's have a look at how this works. So let's put a breakpoint here in validation pipeline behavior, and then let's put a breakpoint here in add employee command handler. And now let's try to add an employee command and check what is happening. So if we just have a look at the database, we will first check what we have in the database. So we can have a look at that. And the API is loaded. Let's just go to Swagger. We'll also check what's there in the database. So if you just see here, we have just 3 employees for now. And let's try to add an employee post. So what I'll do is I'll just use this company ID software development. and try to insert an employee, but I'll give some validation errors. I'll put age as 0 and name is empty, but currently there's no validation, so still it will insert an entry. So let's try to execute this. So as soon as I execute this, you see the first thing which hits is the validation pipeline behavior. So whatever validation code is there can be executed here. And when I execute the next, that's the time when the call will be chained to the actual add employee command handler. So if I put a breakpoint here, if I just go next and next, so as soon as I go there, that's the time when the actual command handler gets hit. And once command handler has executed and inserted the record, it comes up here. So anything you want to do after that can be done here. Okay, so we are good here now. And if you see, the employee record has been added, but if you see, it's an invalid record because we don't have any name. So this is what we are aiming to prevent by putting in the validations. Okay, so let's close this. Let's try to publish the database again so that we have clean records. Load profile, publish. Okay, now the next thing what we'll be doing is adding the validators. And for that, what I'll do is I'll add a NuGet package called Fluent Validation .ASP.NET Core. So let's search for that. And I think the publish is completed. Let's check database. And yes, we have the clean data now. So now next thing what I'll do is I'll go to NuGet packages and just search for Fluent Validation .ASP.NET Core. So this is the one which we'll be using. Let's download the latest stable version, which 11.3.0 at the time I'm recording this video. So whenever you're using it, these versions can change, so you can select accordingly. So we've downloaded this. So now the next thing is we have to create validators, and I prefer to keep it along with the handlers. So I have the modules for each feature, like employee module. I have commands and queries. So if I go to add employee command, there's a command and the command handler, and I prefer adding the validators here. So let me create a class called add employee command validator. So similarly, for each feature, we can create different command or query validators. So let me just add a class called add employee command validator. Now let's just remove this, remove unused usings. I'll change this to public sealed class, add employee command validator. And what I need to do is inherit from abstract validator. So this belongs to the Fluent Validation class, and this will be abstract validator of the incoming command. So the command is employee command. So this is what we need to validate. So add employee command will be validating this. And the way you can set the validation rules is just create the constructor in the validator class. And what you can do is you can use the syntax rule for, and let's say what we have in the add employee command is it's taking create employee request. So we have properties like name, age, position, created on salary, company ID. So you can put rules for all the properties. So what I'll be putting rules for this demo is name and the age property. So let's do that. So in the validator, rule for employee command such that employee command dot we have create employee request dot name, and then if you see, these are the kinds of rules which are possible: empty, not null, less than, greater than, and there are custom also. So you'll find a lot of documentation in the official documentation of Fluent Validation. So for now, I'll just say not null, not empty. And then what we can do is, cool feature is that we can just say with error code. And like we had done for uh, error or, we can have a custom error code. So what I prefer is something like this, a naming standard wherein we know that this is a validation error. So I've named it as VALERR, and then the module employee and the error number 001. So that's how I prefer naming it. And then with message, you can just chain with message here so that it can give a proper message, say employee name is mandatory. Now next I'll add rules for age. So if you see, I've added the rules. Age greater than or equal to 18, and error code is well employee error 02, and it will say employee age must be between 18 and 150. So similarly for less than. So I've given same error codes for this because it's the same thing. It's just checking greater than or equal to. So I've set up these rules. Now the last thing left is wiring up the validators uh, in dependency injection so that we can use them in the pipeline behavior. So let's go to configuration dependency injection. And so since we can add multiple validators, the way we can, instead of registering each validator on a separate line, what we can do is, using reflection, we can register all of them, like services dot add validators from assembly, and the assembly is organization.application, and we'll use the dependency injection class to find the assembly using reflection. So we'll say type of dependency injection dot assembly. So what this does is, this will register all the validators which are available. Now let's go to pipeline behavior. And what we'll need to do is create a private read-only field for validator. I've created it here, and it can be nullable because there can be situations wherein you have not, since it is registering validators for all the handlers, and if a certain validator, certain handlers don't have any validators, so this can be null. So let's make it nullable, and then let's uh, add the constructor, and by default, we'll have it as null because it can be null if it's not, if the validator is not created, the value will be null here. So let's provide the default value as null. Okay. Now the next thing what we can do is, before executing, we'll try to do validation, and the way we can do it is, we'll check if validator is null. If validator is null, then we'll directly await it to the next call in the chain. Then if it is not null, we'll try to validate it. So we'll say var errors, where not errors, validation result. Validation result equal to await underscore validator dot validate async, and we just pass in the request and the cancellation token. So what this will do is, based on the rules, it will try to validate, and then yeah, so validator is now, let's try to see if we put this. Yeah, anyways, we'll just put it here. Yeah, so after validation is done, what we need to check is if it is valid or no. So if validation result dot is valid, so if it is valid, then we again return the next item in the chain, that is the command handler. So this will be successful validation and it will go to the handler. But if the validation results fail, what we'll do is, since we are returning I error or, yeah, so what we'll do is validation result dot errors dot, we'll try to, so this will give us errors from validation result, but we need to convert it to error or, so I'll use convert all, and then I'll use error dot validation, and I'll put in the error code and the error message coming from here as code and description, so that we can display it properly. And finally, what I'll do is I'll return errors. So if you see, for error or, we are returning list of errors here, but the return type is I error or. But one hack we can do here is we can either use reflection to convert this to I error or another hack is using dynamic, so that it automatically converts it. Once this is done, so now what we are doing here is we are converting the validation result errors which it is giving to error or. And if you see in the previous tutorial, we had set up in the base API controller. So if you check here, so if I go to employee controller, and so after the results come here, and if there are errors, it calls problem method, which we have created in the base API controller. So it will hit here. And now in our case for this, if the type is validation, error type is validation, we've already put in a logic, and it will call this method validation problem. And what it will do is it will go to model state dictionary, get all the errors and add it to model state dictionary, so that we are presented with proper validation errors. Okay, so since this is being set now, let's have a look at how it is working. So we've added the validations here. Let's see if it works or no. Let's make a request of creating an employee. Let's use this company ID here, and let's say put the name as empty, so that we see if our validation is working or no. So I'll go to employees, post employee. I'll leave this as blank. Age, I'll put it as 0. And this will be the company ID. So now if I put execute command, if you see, perfect. So our validation is working perfectly fine. So it is giving us 400, which is bad request. It's giving us a title, 1 or more validation errors occurred. And if you see, we are getting exact error codes of which we are missing. That is, well, error EMP01, which is employee is mandatory, and employee age must be between 18 and 150. So if I just change this to 151. Also, it should give me same result again because age is not between that. So now if I just say the age is 25 and execute it, now you see there's only one validation error. So this also shows you that the error or is returning list of errors which can be shown, which we had also seen in the last tutorial. Okay, so I think we've pretty much covered up everything in the validation aspect. So yeah, that's all from this tutorial. Uh, in the next one, what I'll be covering is another validation pipeline behavior we can use for logging. And for logging, what we'll be using is structured logging, that is Serilog. So until then, bye-bye.